Lily was a wisp of a girl, barely 10 years old, with eyes the color of the desert sky after a rain. Her hair, once a vibrant brown, was now dull with dust and neglect, pulled back from her face in a tight braid by her stepmother, Agnes. They were traveling west with a wagon train, a long, snaking line of hopeful families seeking a new life in the promised lands of California. Lily wasn't like the other children on the train. They had mothers who fussed over them, fathers who told them stories by the campfire. Lily only had Agnes, a woman whose heart seemed as barren as the landscape they traversed. Agnes saw Lily as nothing more than an extra mouth to feed, a constant reminder of the husband she'd lost and the dreams that had soured. Despite the hardships, Lily possessed a spirit that refused to be broken. She woke before dawn to help with chores, gathering firewood and fetching water. She mended clothes with nimble fingers, her small hands moving with surprising speed and skill. And she always had a kind word for those who were struggling, a gentle smile that could brighten even the darkest day. One sweltering afternoon, a young boy named Billy fell ill with a fever. His mother, frantic with worry, had no medicine to give him. Lily, remembering a remedy her own mother had taught her, gathered herbs from the nearby fields and brewed a tea. To everyone's surprise, Billy's fever broke, and he was soon back on his feet, playing with the other children. This act of kindness was just one example of Lily's innate goodness. She was always looking for ways to help others, to ease their burdens, to bring a little bit of light into their lives. But Agnes remained unmoved, her heart seemingly impervious to Lily's charm. She saw only a useless child, a drain on her resources, a constant reminder of her own failures. As the wagon train pushed further west, the journey grew increasingly difficult. The days were long and hot, the nights were cold and unforgiving. Supplies dwindled, tempers flared, and the promise of a better life seemed to fade with each passing mile. And it was during this time of hardship that Agnes hatched her cruel plan, a plan that would change Lily's life forever. Agnes's cruelty wasn't born of some sudden impulse. It was a slow-burning resentment that had festered for years. She had married Lily's father, Thomas, a kind and gentle man, hoping for a life of comfort and security. But Thomas was a dreamer, not a businessman, and his ventures often failed. When he died of a fever, he left Agnes with nothing but debts and a young daughter who wasn't her own. Agnes saw Lily as a constant reminder of her failed dreams, a living symbol of her disappointment. She resented having to care for her, to feed her, to provide for her in any way. In her twisted mind, Lily was an obstacle to her own happiness, a burden that she longed to be rid of. The other members of the wagon train noticed Agnes's coldness towards Lily. Some whispered amongst themselves, expressing their disapproval. Mrs. Henderson, a plump, motherly woman with a kind heart, often tried to include Lily in her family's activities, inviting her to share meals and play games with her children. But Agnes always refused, pulling Lily away with a sharp word and a disapproving glare. "She needs to learn her place," Agnes would say, her voice dripping with venom. "She's nothing but an orphan, and she should be grateful for what she has." But Lily knew that Agnes's words were empty. She saw the hatred in her eyes, the disdain in her every gesture. She understood that Agnes didn't want her, that she would be happier if Lily simply disappeared. The rumors of gold in California fueled Agnes's greed. She imagined herself striking it rich, living in a grand house, surrounded by luxury. But she knew that Lily would only be a hindrance to her plans. A young girl was no use in the gold fields, and Agnes certainly wasn't going to share her newfound wealth with a child she didn't love. So, the plan began to take shape in her mind, a dark and sinister plot that would rid her of Lily forever. She would abandon her, leave her to fend for herself in the harsh wilderness. It was a cruel and heartless act, but Agnes convinced herself that it was necessary. It was the only way she could achieve her dreams, the only way she could finally be happy. And as the wagon train rumbled onward, Agnes waited for the perfect opportunity to put her plan into action, her heart as cold and calculating as the desert night. The opportunity Agnes craved arrived in the form of a relentless sandstorm. The wind howled like a banshee, whipping sand into stinging clouds that obscured everything. Visibility was reduced to mere feet, and the wagon train ground to a halt, the drivers struggling to control their frightened animals. People huddled together for warmth and comfort, their faces buried in their arms, trying to shield themselves from the abrasive onslaught. The storm raged for 2 days, trapping the wagon train in its sandy grip. Supplies began to run low, and fear spread like wildfire. Some families succumbed to illness, their bodies weakened by the harsh conditions and lack of food. The mood was grim, and hope seemed to dwindle with each passing hour. Agnes saw her chance. Under the cover of the storm's fury, she led Lily away from the wagon, claiming they needed to find shelter. Lily, trusting as always, followed her stepmother blindly, unaware of the treacherous path she was being led down. They walked for what seemed like hours, the wind tearing at their clothes and the sand stinging their eyes. Finally, Agnes stopped in a desolate patch of land, a small cluster of rocks offering a meager semblance of protection. "Wait here," Agnes said, her voice barely audible above the roar of the wind. "I'm going to look for help." Lily nodded, her heart filled with a flicker of hope. She huddled against the rocks, shivering with cold and exhaustion, and watched as Agnes disappeared into the swirling sand. Hours passed, but Agnes didn't return. The storm showed no signs of abating, and Lily began to realize the terrible truth. She had been abandoned. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the sand and leaving dirty streaks on her cheeks. She called out for Agnes, her voice cracking with despair, but only the wind answered her. Alone and lost in the heart of the storm, Lily felt a wave of fear wash over her. She was just a small girl, and the wilderness was vast and unforgiving. But even in her despair, a spark of resilience flickered within her. She wouldn't give up. She would survive. She had to. Clutching a small, worn doll that had belonged to her mother, Lily closed her eyes and prayed for strength. The storm raged on, but in her heart, a quiet determination began to grow. She would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and she would find a way to survive, even if it meant facing the world alone. The sandstorm eventually subsided, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Dunes had shifted, landmarks had vanished, and the wagon train was scattered and disorganized. It took the better part of a day for the travelers to regroup, counting their losses and tending to the injured. Lily remained where Agnes had left her, huddled against the rocks, her small body trembling with cold and fear. The sun beat down mercilessly during the day, and the nights were bitterly cold. She had no food, no water, and no idea where to go. She rationed the few drops of water she had managed to collect in her cupped hands during the storm, making them last as long as possible. She ate small insects and berries, anything she could find to stave off the hunger pangs that gnawed at her stomach. Loneliness was her constant companion. She missed the familiar faces of the wagon train, the sound of children laughing, the warmth of a campfire. She missed her mother, too, though her memories of her were fading like old photographs. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lily heard a sound in the distance. It was a low, mournful howl, the sound of a coyote calling to its pack. Fear gripped her heart, but she forced herself to remain calm. She knew that wild animals roamed the desert, and she had to be careful. She climbed to the top of the rocks, hoping to get a better view of her surroundings. In the distance, she saw a faint glimmer, a reflection of light that offered a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she had to reach it. With renewed determination, Lily set off in the direction of the light, her small legs carrying her forward despite her exhaustion. She stumbled and fell, scraped her knees, and bruised her elbows, but she kept going, driven by the hope that she would find help, that she wouldn't have to face the wilderness alone. As she walked, she talked to her doll, telling it stories about her mother, about the places she had seen, about the dreams she still held dear. The doll was her only friend, her only confidant, and she clung to it tightly, drawing strength from its silent presence. The journey was long and arduous, but Lily refused to give up. She was an orphan, abandoned and alone, but she was also strong, resilient, and determined to survive. And as she walked towards the light, she knew that she would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and she would find her way, no matter how difficult the path. Miles away, riding his favorite palomino, Goldie, was Jake. He was a man of the land, weathered and strong, with a face etched with the wisdom of the desert. His ranch, the Bar None, was the largest in the territory, sprawling across acres of fertile land and supporting thousands of head of cattle. But Jake wasn't just a wealthy rancher. He was a man of principle, known for his honesty, fairness, and unwavering sense of justice. He treated his employees with respect, paid them fairly, and always stood up for what he believed in, even when it wasn't popular. He was riding the range, checking on his cattle after the storm, making sure they hadn't strayed too far or been injured. The sandstorm had wreaked havoc, scattering his herd and damaging fences. He was a solitary figure, comfortable in his own company, content with the simple rhythm of life on the ranch. Jake had a past, a history of loss that had shaped him into the man he was today. He had lost his wife to illness many years ago, and the pain of her absence still lingered in his heart. He had never remarried, dedicating his life to his ranch and his community. As he rode, he noticed something unusual in the distance. A small, dark shape against the horizon, moving slowly and deliberately. He squinted, trying to make out what it was. At first, he thought it was a stray dog or a coyote, but as he got closer, he realized it was something else entirely. It was a child. He spurred Goldie forward, his heart pounding in his chest. What was a child doing out here, alone in the middle of nowhere? Had she been lost? Had she been abandoned? As he approached, he saw that the child was a girl, small and frail, with dust-covered clothes and tear-stained cheeks. She was clutching a doll in her arms, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Jake dismounted Goldie and approached her cautiously, his voice gentle and reassuring. "Hello there, little one," he said, kneeling down to her level. "Are you all right? What's your name?" The girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with suspicion and hope. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My name is Lily." Jake knew in that moment that his life was about to change forever. He had found something precious in the middle of the desert, something that needed his help, something that needed his love. And he wouldn't hesitate to give it. He knew it. "Lily," Jake repeated softly, testing the sound of her name on his tongue. He noticed the way she clutched the worn doll, its painted face faded and cracked, and his heart ached for her. He carefully offered her a canteen of water, watching her intently as she took a tentative sip. "Easy there, little one," he cautioned gently. "Don't drink too fast." Lily obeyed, swallowing slowly, her eyes never leaving his. After she had finished drinking, Jake offered her a piece of jerky from his saddlebag. She hesitated for a moment, then took it with a grateful nod. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still hoarse. "You're welcome, Lily," Jake replied. "Now, can you tell me what you're doing out here all alone?" Lily hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. She told him about the wagon train, about her stepmother, about the sandstorm, and about being left behind. Her voice trembled as she recounted her ordeal, and Jake listened patiently, his heart growing heavier with each word. When she had finished, Jake let out a low whistle, his eyes filled with anger and disbelief. "That's a terrible thing, Lily," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "A terrible thing to do to a child." He knew he couldn't leave her out here, not after what she had been through. He had to help her, to protect her, to give her a home. "Lily," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'm going to take you back to my ranch. It's a safe place with plenty of food and water. You can stay there as long as you need to." Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. "You mean it?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. "I mean it," Jake replied, smiling warmly. "Now come on, let's get you up on Goldie. She's a gentle horse, and she'll take good care of you." He carefully lifted Lily onto the horse, settling her in front of him. He wrapped his arms around her protectively, feeling her small body tremble against his. "Hold on tight," Lily, he said, his voice low and reassuring. We're going home. And with that, Jake turned Goldie around and headed back towards his ranch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the desert. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he had made the right decision. He had rescued a little girl from the wilderness, and in doing so, he had found a new purpose in his life. He had found a daughter. The ride back to the bar none was long, but Lily didn't mind. She felt safe and secure in Jake's arms, the gentle rhythm of Goldie's gait lulling her into a peaceful state. She drifted in and out of sleep, her head resting against Jake's broad chest, her worries slowly fading away. As they approached the ranch, Lily gasped in amazement. The bar none was even bigger and more beautiful than she had imagined. A sprawling adobe house stood at the center of the compound, surrounded by corrals, barns, and bunkhouses. Cattle grazed peacefully in the surrounding fields, and cowboys went about their daily chores, their voices carrying on the gentle breeze. Jake smiled, seeing the wonder in Lily's eyes. "Welcome to the bar none, Lily," he said, his voice filled with pride. "This is your home now." As they rode into the courtyard, a group of cowboys gathered around, their faces etched with curiosity. They had never seen Jake bring a child to the ranch before, and they were eager to find out what was going on. Jake dismounted Goldie and carefully lifted Lily down, introducing her to his ranch hands. "This is Lily," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. "She's going to be staying with us for a while. I expect you all to treat her with kindness and respect." The cowboys nodded their heads in agreement, their eyes filled with sympathy for the little girl. They knew that Jake wouldn't bring anyone to the ranch unless they were in need of help, and they were eager to do whatever they could to make Lily feel welcome. One of the cowboys, a tall, lanky fellow named Slim, stepped forward and offered Lily a warm smile. "Welcome to the bar none, Lily," he said, his voice gentle and kind. "We're glad to have you here." Lily smiled back shyly, feeling a flicker of hope in her heart. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. Maybe she had finally found a place where she belonged. Jake led Lily into the house, where she was greeted by Mrs. Rodriguez, the ranch cook, a kind and matronly woman with a warm smile and a gentle touch. Mrs. Rodriguez immediately took Lily under her wing, leading her to a warm bath and providing her with clean clothes. As Lily soaked in the tub, feeling the grime and dirt wash away, she couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, clean, and cared for. And as she looked forward to the future, she couldn't help but wonder what it held in store for her at the bar none. Life at the bar none was a world away from the hardships Lily had known on the wagon train. She had her own room, a cozy space with a soft bed and colorful quilts. Mrs. Rodriguez made sure she was well fed, serving her delicious meals and baking her special treats. And the cowboys treated her like a little sister, teaching her how to ride a horse, rope a calf, and shoot a rifle. At first, Lily was shy and withdrawn, still haunted by the memories of her abandonment. She kept to herself, spending most of her time reading books and playing with her doll. But slowly, as she began to feel safe and loved, she started to open up, her laughter echoing through the ranch house. Jake made it a point to spend time with Lily every day, reading her stories, playing games, and simply talking to her about her hopes and dreams. He taught her about ranching, about the importance of hard work and honesty, and about the beauty of the natural world. Lily, in turn, brought a new sense of joy and purpose to Jake's life. He had been lonely since his wife's death, his heart empty and aching. But with Lily in his life, the ranch felt like a home again, filled with laughter, love, and light. One sunny afternoon, Jake took Lily on a picnic to a nearby meadow, a vast expanse of wildflowers and green grass. They spread out a blanket and ate sandwiches and fruit, enjoying the peace and quiet of the countryside. As they ate, Lily turned to Jake, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice sincere. "Thank you for taking me in. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jake smiled warmly, reaching out and stroking her hair. "You don't have to thank me, Lily," he said, his voice gentle. "You're family now, and family takes care of each other." He paused, his eyes filled with emotion. You know, Lily, he continued, I've been thinking a lot about your stepmother. What she did was wrong, and I can't just let her get away with it. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide with concern. What are you going to do, Jake? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake took a deep breath, his jaw set with determination. I'm going to find her, Lily, he said, his voice firm, and I'm going to make sure she pays for what she did. News of Jake's intentions spread quickly through the town of Redemption, the closest settlement to the Bar None. Some admired his unwavering sense of justice, while others cautioned him against getting involved. Agnes, they warned, was a cunning and ruthless woman, and he might be biting off more than he could chew. But Jake remained undeterred. He had made a promise to Lily, and he wasn't about to back down. He enlisted the help of his friend, Sheriff Brody, a grizzled old lawman with a reputation for fairness and integrity. Together, they began to track Agnes's movements, piecing together clues and following her trail. Meanwhile, back at the Bar None, Lily continued to adjust to her new life. She helped Mrs. Rodriguez in the kitchen, learning how to bake bread, churn butter, and prepare delicious meals. She also assisted the cowboys with their chores, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, and mending fences. She proved to be a quick learner, her nimble fingers and sharp mind making her a valuable asset to the ranch. She even started to develop a knack for horse training, her gentle touch and patient demeanor earning the trust of even the most skittish animals. One day, while Jake was away searching for Agnes, a traveling salesman arrived at the Bar None, his wagon laden with goods and trinkets. He set up shop in the courtyard, displaying his wares for the cowboys and ranch hands to admire. Lily was drawn to a beautiful music box, its intricate carvings and delicate melody capturing her attention. She longed to have it, but she knew that Jake wouldn't approve of her spending money on frivolous things. As she admired the music box, the salesman approached her, his eyes twinkling with mischief. That's a fine piece, little lady, he said, his voice smooth and persuasive. It's worth a pretty penny, but I can see that you have an eye for beauty. He paused, leaning closer to her. Tell you what, he whispered, his voice conspiratorial. I'll let you have it for a song. All you have to do is run an errand for me. Lily hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that it was wrong to do something behind Jake's back, but the temptation was too great. She desperately wanted that music box. What kind of errand? She asked, her voice barely audible. The salesman smiled slyly, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Nothing too difficult, he said. Just a little message I need delivered to a friend of mine in town. Lily knew that she was playing with fire, but she couldn't resist. She agreed to do the errand, taking the message from the salesman and promising to deliver it as soon as possible. Little did she know that she was about to become entangled in a web of deceit and danger, a web that could jeopardize everything she had come to love at the Bar None. Unbeknownst to Lily, the message she carried was intended for a notorious outlaw named Black Bart, who was known for robbing stagecoaches and terrorizing the countryside. The salesman was one of Bart's accomplices, and the message contained information about an upcoming gold shipment that Bart planned to intercept. As Lily rode into town, her heart pounded with guilt and anxiety. She knew that she was doing something wrong, but she couldn't shake the desire for the music box. She found a saloon where Bart was supposed to be waiting and cautiously entered, her eyes scanning the room for a familiar face. She spotted a man sitting alone at a table in the corner, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He looked rough and dangerous, and Lily instantly knew that he was the one. She approached him hesitantly, her hand trembling as she handed him the message. "This is for you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man took the message without a word, his eyes cold and calculating. He opened it and read it quickly, his lips curling into a sinister smile. "Thank you, little girl," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You've been a great help." As Lily turned to leave, she overheard the man talking to another outlaw, plotting the details of the stagecoach robbery. She realized then the gravity of what she had done, the danger she had put herself and everyone else in. She ran out of the saloon, her heart filled with terror and regret. She knew that she had to warn Jake, but she didn't know how. She was afraid of what he would say, afraid of disappointing him. Meanwhile, Jake and Sheriff Brody were hot on Agnes's trail, tracking her through the rugged terrain. They had learned that she was headed towards California, hoping to strike it rich in the gold fields. As they rode, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong back at the Bar None. He sensed that Lily was in danger, and he knew that he had to get back to her as soon as possible. He turned to Sheriff Brody, his eyes filled with concern. "I have a bad feeling, Brody," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "I think Lily might be in trouble." Sheriff Brody nodded his head in agreement. "I feel it too, Jake," he said. "Let's head back to the Bar None. We can always pick up Agnes's trail later." And with that, Jake and Sheriff Brody turned their horses around and raced back towards the Bar None, unaware of the danger that awaited them. They didn't know that Lily had unwittingly become a pawn in a dangerous game, a game that could have deadly consequences. As Jake and Sheriff Brody raced towards the Bar None, Lily struggled with her conscience. She knew she had to tell Jake about the message, but she was terrified of what he would say. She found him in the barn, tending to Goldie. He looked up as she approached, his eyes filled with concern. "Lily, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Lily burst into tears, her words tumbling out in a jumbled mess. She told him about the salesman, about the music box, and about the message she had delivered to Black Bart. Jake listened patiently, his face growing darker with each word. When she had finished, he let out a long, slow breath, his eyes filled with anger and disappointment. "Lily," he said, his voice low and stern, "what you did was very foolish and very dangerous. You could have gotten yourself killed." Lily hung her head in shame, tears streaming down her face. "I know, Jake," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted the music box so badly." Jake sighed, his anger slowly giving way to compassion. He knew that Lily hadn't meant any harm, that she had simply been naive and easily led astray. He reached out and gently lifted her chin, his eyes filled with tenderness. "It's all right, Lily," he said, his voice softening. "I know you didn't mean to do anything wrong, but you have to promise me that you'll never do anything like that again." Lily nodded her head eagerly, her eyes filled with remorse. "I promise, Jake," she said, her voice sincere. "I'll never lie to you again." Just then, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Jake looked out the barn door and saw Sheriff Brody riding into the courtyard, his face grim. "Jake," Brody said, his voice urgent, "there's trouble brewing in town. Black Bart and his gang are planning to rob the stagecoach tomorrow. We need to do something to stop them." Jake nodded his head grimly. "I know, Brody," he said. "Lily just told me everything." He turned to Lily, his eyes filled with determination. "Lily," he said, "I need you to be brave. I need you to help us stop Black Bart." Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. She didn't know if she was brave enough, but she knew that she had to do something to make up for her mistake. "What do you want me to do, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake smiled reassuringly, his eyes filled with pride. "I need you to ride into town and warn the stagecoach driver," he said. "Tell him to change his route and avoid the ambush." Lily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was her chance to redeem herself, to prove that she was worthy of Jake's trust. "I'll do it, Jake," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I won't let you down." Lily rode into town like a whirlwind, her heart pounding in her chest. She found the stagecoach driver, a burly man named Hank, and breathlessly explained the situation, urging him to change his route. Hank listened intently, his face growing more serious with each word. He knew that Black Bart was a dangerous outlaw, and he didn't want to risk the lives of his passengers. "Thank you, little lady," he said, his voice grateful. "You may have just saved us all." He quickly gathered his passengers and explained the situation, and they all agreed to take a different route, avoiding the ambush. As Lily rode back to the Bar None, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had done something good, something that had made a difference. She had proven that she was worthy of Jake's trust. But her relief was short-lived. As she approached the ranch, she saw a familiar figure standing in the courtyard, talking to Jake. It was Agnes. Lily's heart sank. She knew that Agnes had only one thing on her mind, money. And now that she had learned about Jake's wealth, she was determined to get her hands on it, even if it meant using Lily as a pawn. Lily dismounted her horse and cautiously approached them, her eyes filled with suspicion. "Lily, darling," Agnes exclaimed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Where have you been? I've been so worried about you." She rushed towards Lily and enveloped her in a hug, but Lily could feel the coldness in her heart. "What are you doing here, Agnes?" Lily asked, her voice firm. "I've come to take you home, of course," Agnes replied, her eyes darting towards Jake. "I've realized that I made a terrible mistake leaving you behind. I'm your stepmother, and it's my duty to care for you." Jake stepped forward, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "That's not what Lily told me," he said, his voice stern. "She said you abandoned her in the desert." Agnes gasped, her eyes widening in feigned innocence. "That's a lie," she exclaimed. "I would never do such a thing." Lily must have been confused, traumatized by the storm. She turned to Lily, her eyes pleading. "Tell him, Lily," she said. "Tell him that I'm telling the truth." Lily looked from Agnes to Jake, her heart torn in two. She knew that Agnes was lying, but she was afraid of what would happen if she told the truth. Jake saw the fear in her eyes, the conflict in her heart. He knew that Agnes was trying to manipulate her, to use her to get what she wanted. He stepped forward, his voice firm and unwavering. "I don't believe you, Agnes," he said. "I know what you did to Lily, and I won't let you hurt her again." Agnes's face contorted with anger, her eyes flashing with hatred. "You can't keep her from me," she shrieked. "She's my stepdaughter, and I have a right to her." "You forfeited that right when you abandoned her in the desert," Jake replied, his voice cold and dismissive. "Now get off my property before I call the sheriff." Agnes glared at Jake, her eyes filled with venom. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll be back, and I'll get what's mine." She turned and stormed off, leaving Jake and Lily standing alone in the courtyard. Jake turned to Lily, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right, Lily?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lily nodded her head, tears streaming down her face, her body trembling with fear. Jake wrapped his arms around her protectively, his eyes filled with love and compassion. "It's all right, Lily," he whispered, his voice soothing. "I won't let her hurt you. I promise." He knew that Agnes wouldn't give up easily. She was a determined and ruthless woman, and she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. He had to find a way to protect Lily, to keep her safe from Agnes's greed and malice. The next morning, Jake and Sheriff Brody rode into town, determined to stop Black Bart and his gang. They gathered the townsfolk and explained the situation, urging them to help defend the stagecoach. To their surprise, the townsfolk readily agreed. They were tired of being terrorized by Black Bart and his gang, and they were eager to put an end to their reign of terror. They armed themselves with rifles and shotguns, and they set up an ambush along the stagecoach route, waiting for Black Bart and his gang to arrive. Meanwhile, Agnes was plotting her next move. She knew that she couldn't take Lily by force, so she decided to try a different tactic. She went to the town's lawyer, a shifty character named Mr. Billings, and hired him to file a lawsuit against Jake, claiming that he had kidnapped Lily and was holding her against her will. Mr. Billings, eager to earn a quick buck, readily agreed to take the case. He filed the lawsuit, and a court hearing was scheduled for the following week. News of the lawsuit spread quickly through the town, and the townsfolk were outraged. They knew that Agnes was lying, that Jake had saved Lily from a terrible fate. They rallied around Jake, offering their support and vowing to testify on his behalf. They knew that he was a good man, a kind and generous man, and they wouldn't let Agnes take Lily away from him. At the court hearing, Mr. Billings presented his case, painting Jake as a heartless kidnapper and Agnes as a loving stepmother who simply wanted her daughter back. But the townsfolk wouldn't let his lies stand unchallenged. One by one, they took the stand and testified on Jake's behalf, praising his kindness, his generosity, and his unwavering sense of justice. Mrs. Henderson, the woman from the wagon train, testified about Agnes's cruelty towards Lily, about how she had neglected her, mistreated her, and eventually abandoned her in the desert. Slim, the cowboy from the Bar None, testified about how Jake had rescued Lily, how he had given her a home, and how he had treated her like his own daughter. And finally, Lily herself took the stand, her voice trembling with emotion. She told the judge about her stepmother's cruelty, about the horror she had endured on the wagon train, and about the kindness and love she had found at the barn. She looked directly at Agnes, her eyes filled with tears. "Jake is my family now," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "I don't want to go back with you. I want to stay with Jake." The judge listened intently to the testimony, his face growing more serious with each word. He knew that Agnes was lying, that she was simply trying to exploit Jake's wealth. He ruled in Jake's favor, dismissing the lawsuit and declaring that Lily was free to stay at the barn. Agnes was furious, her face contorted with rage. She stormed out of the courtroom, vowing revenge. But Jake wasn't worried. He knew that he had the support of the community, and he wouldn't let Agnes harm. That afternoon, as Jake and Sheriff Brody prepared to confront Black Bart, Lily felt a surge of determination. She couldn't just sit back and let them risk their lives. She had to do something to help. She knew that Black Bart and his gang were planning to rob the stagecoach at a narrow pass in the mountains. She also knew that there was a secret trail that led to the top of the pass, a trail that only a few people knew about. She decided to ride to the top of the pass and warn Jake and Sheriff Brody about Black Bart's plan. She saddled up Goldie and rode off, her heart pounding in her chest. As she rode, she remembered the lessons that Jake had taught her about courage, about honesty, and about standing up for what was right. She knew that she was doing the right thing, and she wouldn't let anything stop her. She reached the top of the pass just as Black Bart and his gang were preparing to ambush the stagecoach. She saw Jake and Sheriff Brody riding towards them, unaware of the danger that awaited them. She knew that she had to act quickly. She pulled out her rifle and fired a warning shot into the air, alerting Jake and Sheriff Brody to the ambush. Black Bart and his gang were caught by surprise. They scrambled for cover, but Jake and Sheriff Brody were ready for them. A fierce gunfight ensued, the air filled with the sound of gunfire and the smell of gunpowder. Lily joined the fight, firing her rifle with deadly accuracy. Together, Jake, Sheriff Brody, and Lily managed to defeat Black Bart and his gang, capturing them and bringing them to justice. The townsfolk were overjoyed. They hailed Jake, Sheriff Brody, and Lily as heroes, praising their courage and their bravery. As for Agnes, her reputation was ruined. She was exposed as a liar, a cheat, and a heartless woman who had abandoned her own stepdaughter in the desert. She was shunned by the community, driven out of town, and forced to live a life of shame and regret. With Agnes gone, Lily was finally safe and secure at the barn. She knew that she had found a home, a family, and a place where she belonged. Jake officially adopted Lily, making her his daughter and his heir. They lived happily ever after, their lives filled with love, laughter, and joy. Lily grew into a strong, independent woman, carrying on Jake's legacy of kindness, generosity, and justice. She used her wealth and her influence to help others, to make the world a better place. And as she looked back on her life, she knew that she had been through many hardships, but she had also been blessed with many gifts. She had found love, she had found family, and she had found a purpose in her life. She was no longer the orphan girl who had been abandoned in the desert. She was Lily, daughter of Jake, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She was ready to live her life to the fullest, to make a difference in the world, and to honor the memory of the man who had saved her life and given her a home. She was finally home. The adoption ceremony was a joyous occasion, celebrated by the entire community. The townsfolk gathered at the barn, bringing gifts, food, and well wishes. Mrs. Rodriguez baked a huge cake, decorated with flowers and frosting. The cowboys sang songs, played music, and danced the night away. Jake stood proudly beside Lily, his eyes filled with love and happiness. He had never felt so complete, so fulfilled. He had found a daughter, a companion, and a partner in life. Lily, too, was overjoyed. She had finally found a family, a place where she belonged, and a man who loved her unconditionally. She knew that she was the luckiest girl in the world. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the landscape, Jake gathered everyone around and raised his glass in a toast. "To Lily," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "My daughter, my partner, and my best friend. May her life be filled with happiness, love, and success." The crowd cheered, raising their glasses in response. "To Lily," they shouted. "To Lily." After the toast, Jake and Lily shared a special dance, their arms wrapped around each other, their hearts beating as one. They danced slowly and gracefully, their eyes locked in a gaze of love and affection. As they danced, Lily whispered in Jake's ear, "Thank you, Jake. Thank you for everything." Jake smiled warmly, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to thank me, Lily," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm the lucky one. You've brought so much joy and happiness into my life." From that day forward, Jake and Lily lived as father and daughter, sharing their lives, their dreams, and their adventures. They worked side by side on the ranch, tending to the cattle, mending fences, and riding the range. They traveled to distant lands, exploring new places, meeting new people, and experiencing new cultures. They learned from each other, supported each other, and loved each other unconditionally. Jake taught Lily about the importance of hard work, honesty, and integrity. He taught her how to be a good leader, how to make wise decisions, and how to treat others with kindness and respect. Lily taught Jake about the importance of love, compassion, and forgiveness. She taught him how to open his heart, how to let go of the past, and how to embrace the future. Together, they made the barn none a place of love, laughter, and generosity. They helped those in need, supported their community, and made the world a better place. And as they grew older, they knew that their love for each other would never fade, that their bond would never be broken. They were family, and they would always be there for each other, no matter what challenges life might bring. Their love story became a legend in the West, a testament to the power of kindness, compassion, and the enduring bond between a father and a daughter. They proved that family isn't always about blood, but about love, loyalty, and unwavering support. They were truly a family forged in the heart of the Wild West. Years passed, and the barn none continued to thrive under Jake and Lily's care. Jake, his hair now silvered with age, watched with pride as Lily blossomed into a remarkable woman. She was strong, independent, and compassionate, just as he had always hoped she would be. She had inherited his business acumen, his unwavering sense of justice, and his deep love for the land. She managed the ranch with skill and efficiency, implementing new technologies and sustainable practices. She also continued to help those in need, donating generously to charities, supporting local schools, and providing opportunities for young people to pursue their dreams. Jake eventually passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his loved ones. Lily was heartbroken by his loss, but she knew that she had to carry on his legacy, to continue his work, and to honor his memory. She took over the reins of the barn none, becoming one of the most powerful and respected ranchers in the West. She used her wealth and her influence to promote peace, justice, and equality. She established a foundation to support orphans and abandoned children, providing them with food, shelter, education, and love. She also worked to protect the environment, preserving the natural beauty of the West for future generations. She never forgot her own humble beginnings, the hardships she had endured, and the kindness she had received. She remained grateful for every blessing in her life, and she always strived to make a difference in the world. She married a kind and honorable man, a rancher from a neighboring state, and they had several children, all of whom inherited her strength, her compassion, and her unwavering sense of justice. And as she looked back on her life, she knew that she had achieved everything she had ever dreamed of. She had found love, she had found family, and she had found a purpose in her life. She was no longer the orphan girl who had been abandoned in the desert. She was Lily, daughter of Jake, and she had become a legend in her own right, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Her story was told and retold around campfires, in saloons, and in schoolhouses, inspiring generations of young people to dream big, to work hard, and to never give up on their hopes and dreams. And so, the legend of Lily, the orphan girl who had been left on the trail but found a home and a family with the wealthiest cowboy in the West, continued to live on, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, there is always love, and there is always the possibility of a brighter future. She was, and would always be, a beacon of light in the Wild West.